To learn more about earning college credits with study hall courses, visit gostudyhall.com or click the link in the description. Let's just think for a second about thinking. Like right now, you're having thoughts because I'm saying words somewhere far away from you in time and space. It's pretty wild. Our brains are always processing input from both inside and outside the body. And it's deciding what's relevant and communicating that to different body systems and orchestrating how to react to all that info. Just take something super mundane like laundry that needs to be folded. The moment we see a pile of wrinkly t-shirts in a basket, our brain considers whether to do it now or remember to do it later. But that heap of clothes can also spur different emotions, like excitement about getting to wear a new shirt, or a deep dread about how much of our lives we spend folding laundry, only to have it get dirty again, endlessly. Maybe that's just me. Even something that seems mind-numbing like laundry relies on the incredible complexity of our brains in ways that are, well, mind-blowing. Hi, I'm Deja Fitzgerald, and this is Study Hall, Intro to Psychology. Psychology is the study of the mind and behavior, and those things involve the brain. That means as people interested in psychology, it's important for us to draw from another field that deals with the brain, neuroscience. Neuroscience actually involves more than just the brain. It's the study of the nervous system, which is a collection of specialized cells that allow you to sense things around and within you as well as take action. All of your thoughts, emotions, and behavior come from different parts of the nervous system. So let's dive into the nervous system with a look at its essential building blocks, neurons. Neurons are cells that use a combination of electrical and chemical signals to communicate with each other. Basically, they receive and pass along information. Like, imagine for a moment the pain of a stubbed toe, or the joy of stepping out into an unexpectedly sunshiny day. We can't have experiences like these without parts of our body feeding us detailed information. So let's say Mortimer is so focused on the beautiful day outside that he doesn't notice the curb. Whack! His toe gets stubbed. Immediately, his body begins sending messages from the point of impact up to the brain and back again. Neurons are arranged so that they almost touch, forming a synapse, which is where part of one neuron gets really close to part of another neuron so that they can communicate with each other. Now, there are a lot of parts here, so stick with me. On one side of the synapse is a long, thin segment of the neuron called an axon that ends in the synaptic bouton. And inside the synaptic bouton are synaptic vesicles, which are like little sacs that contain the chemical messengers that will cross the synapse, called neurotransmitters. Now, watch the neurotransmitters because they're where the action is. When a neuron receives a message to release neurotransmitters, the synaptic vesicles release neurotransmitters into a narrow gap between the two neurons. The neurotransmitters then move toward another long thin segment of the neuron on the other side of the synapse called the dendrite. And the dendrite has one job, to receive messages. So they have receptors that the neurotransmitters bind to. Okay, so now that you know all the parts, let's back up to when Mortimer stubbed his toe and see what happens. A particular kind of neuron, a sensory neuron, takes the pain stimulus and a flood of neurochemicals hits the dendrites. This makes the neuron go from staying in a resting potential to having an action potential. This means that the neuron goes from being in a state of electrical charge, where it's ready to pass along a message, to passing that electrical signal down the axon. That signal then reaches the neuron's axon ending, where it releases the neurotransmitters that bind to the dendrite of the next neuron, that swallowed the spider to catch the fly. Oh my. So the original chemical messages become an electrical signal that is used to send out more chemical messages. Now, take what we've talked about for just one synapse and multiply that, a few thousand times. That's how messages move to and through the brain, which has a staggering number of synapses. Each neuron in the giant game of synapse telephone transmits information about the stubbed toe and triggers all kinds of complex reactions. From the feeling of pain to the involuntary yelling of, "Golly gee willikers," or whatever else you shout when you stub your toe. Even a simple reaction is truly thousands of rapid moments of neuron communication. Now, that was just a high-level overview, because like we said at the start, what's going on here is incredibly complex. And neurons are really just the basic building blocks. Together, neurons work to create all the different parts of the nervous system, like the central nervous system that includes the brain and the spinal cord, and a neuron network all over the body known as the peripheral nervous system. To describe how the nervous system works, it's helpful to divide and describe the nervous system in different ways, like by function or location in the body. For instance, the peripheral nervous system relays key information as part of the autonomic nervous system, which is all the elements that control involuntary actions. The autonomic nervous system consists of the sympathetic nervous system, which activates our bodies in response to threats or stressors, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps with rest and digestion. Then there's the central nervous system, which is made up of the brain and spinal cord. The spinal cord is a column of nervous tissue that runs from the back of the skull down the middle of our backs. It relays signals related to movement and the senses between the brain and the rest of the body. The spinal cord is protected by the bones of the spine in a way that's similar to how our skulls protect our brains. Speaking of the brain, we can understand this incredible organ by exploring its various parts. First, we've got our cerebrum, the wrinkly, two-sided, giant walnut that we often think about when we picture the brain. Each side is known as a hemisphere. We all use both fairly equally, but each hemisphere has different responsibilities, at least in general. For example, one does a little more language work, and weirdly enough, each hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body. In between the hemispheres is the corpus callosum, an epically named band of neural fibers that allows the two hemispheres to communicate with each other. Even though dividing the brain or cerebrum into hemispheres and corpus callosum helps us describe how it looks, researchers also divide the brain into a front part, a top middle part, a bottom middle part, and a back part called lobes. The frontal, occipital, parietal, and temporal lobes house certain functions in most human brains. These lobes are used as regions that researchers can refer to as they map different functions onto different parts of the brain. For instance, the prefrontal cortex, located in the frontal lobe, consistently lights up on brain scans when high-level cognition is happening, like when someone is making complicated plans and decisions like what kind of car to buy or what to name your island in Animal Crossing. But the brain can also be divided up into three regions another way. The first region is the forebrain, and that includes all those lobes we talked about and regions under the corpus callosum that are parts of the limbic system, which regulates and processes emotions, as well as the thalamus, a relay that routes sensory and movement for information. The next region is the midbrain, which includes various structures between the forebrain and the hindbrain, including the reticular formation, which helps regulate sleeping and waking, alertness and motor activity. It'd also be a pretty great name for a rock band. And finally, there's the hindbrain, right at the back of the brain, as you'd expect from the name. This includes the pons, a bridge from brain to spinal cord, the medulla, which keeps us breathing and handles heart rate and blood pressure automatically, and the cerebellum, which does a ton of work on balance, coordination, and movement using info from our muscles and joints. So whether you divide it into hemispheres or lobes or the fore, mid, and hindbrain, our brains have a lot going on. It's a lot of vocab, I know, but each way of thinking about and labeling the brain helps those of us studying psychology to focus on different parts of the brain and what they can do specifically. So given all the parts we worked through, it seems like researchers know a lot about the brain. And that's definitely the case. But psychology researchers are still hard at work trying to figure out what makes our brains effective or ineffective at the myriad of things the brain is involved in. Like, there are a lot of questions about how we develop expertise. When you go to your doctor, you might wonder if your doctor was born a genius who was reading at 2 years old, or if she was a child with average intelligence, like me, who spent time studying hard to become an amazing physician. It's unclear how much of our genetic makeup determines how our brain will function, and how much of our brain's capabilities come from experiences we have in childhood and beyond. It's not always straightforward to figure out either, since research has shown that children can inherit traits that skip their parents' generation, for instance. And lots of questions relate to this nature versus nurture conundrum. Brains definitely respond to environmental influences, which are those nurture factors, but not always in the same ways. For example, identical twins growing up in the same home can be quite different from each other, despite having the same genes. Studying how brains respond to our environments has spawned a very cool area of study within psychological and neuroscientific research called neuroplasticity. It's based on a growing body of evidence that the brain can reorganize itself based on changes in the environment, create new connections, even grow new neurons and heal from traumatic injuries. Neuroplasticity can be divided into two types that different researchers investigate. Functional neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to transfer functions from a damaged brain region to other undamaged regions. This allows some people to regain movement after they've been partially paralyzed by a stroke. The other type of neuroplasticity is structural neuroplasticity, which is about how the brain actually restructures itself in response to learning new things. A commonly studied example is how meditation can change the physical structures of the brain. Experienced meditators increase the thickness of the hippocampus, a part of the brain that plays a role in forming long-term memories, and they also decrease the volume of the amygdala, an area responsible for fear, stress, and anxiety emotions. These are just some of the ways that neuroscience researchers study the nervous system. They also tackle kinds of questions that we ask in psychology, like, what makes you, you? How much of who we are is nature versus nurture? How do we change in response to our experiences? The two fields offer a variety of approaches to better understanding thought, emotion, and behavior. So, axons, dendrites, neurotransmitters, the action potential, the corpus callosum, the spinal cord, neuroplasticity. Our neurons and the parts of our nervous system they make up are astonishingly complex. Researchers have made incredible strides to understand that complexity, but much of ongoing scientific study reminds us just how mysterious the brain is. Even when we aren't delving into the mysteries of the brain or looking at topics in psychology at the level of neurons, it's helpful to know that we can explore and understand our minds and behavior with neuroscience perspectives. And the perspective that the brain's mysteries can be understood by way of cells and their messages is stunning and empowering. If you're enjoying Study Hall Intro to Psychology and are interested in taking an online course and earning college credit, visit gostudyhall.com or click this button to learn more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.